We're going to be talking about something I'm a very big fan of this week, and that is girls in art form. This is going to be good. Last week, my friend LordX suggested that I talk about the best of females in comic books. And I thought, LordX, that's a brilliant idea. Now, going into this, I'm going to tell you now, we're going to have 10 main points with a few honourable mentions at the end, but they're not in any particular order. I could not decide who should be above who. Sorry, my mind ran with that sentence. I couldn't decide what order they should go in, who was the best over this person and that person. So I just threw them all together, and I'm going to just talk about them in just sort of like an order I've just thrown them in. Also, I personally, in terms of comic book characters, or comic books in general, I'm a particular fan of Marvel. Then you may notice a slight bias in the numbers of what world these characters come from, more so than others. But let's get started. First mention goes to Wonder Woman, and the reason I've chosen her to go first is because she was the first real empowered woman in comic books, at least to my knowledge. I mean, there may have been other female heroes, superheroes in other forms of comic, but first real, proper, superpowered super heroine, I think, was Wonder Woman. First created in 1941 by psychologist William Moulton Marston, who also invented the polygraph, so you can kind of see a link there with the lasso of truth, and his wife Elizabeth. She was then, and to this day, a powerful symbol in the areas of female equality, sexual equality, and female power and strength and independence. And she's easily one of the most recognisable female superheroes in the world, and there's merit to that. But it's kind of weird and kind of funny when you think of the fact that the character model, the art, was based around, yes, Elizabeth, but also a woman called Olive Byrne, who lived with William and Elizabeth in a polygamous relationship. Now, someone will be saying, yeah, sexual equality, people can do what they want, but then there's a lot of other people who'll be like, this guy had 2 wives. And add to that the fact that the character, one of her most widely accepted origin stories from back in the beginning at least, was that she was sculpted from clay, and what a sculpture. One hell of a role model for females there, running around in a boob tube, hot pants, and a tiara. Next, we're going to move on to Jubilee. Now, when I was a lot younger and I read old X-Men comics and watched the 90s cartoon, I really liked Jubilee. She was a character that kind of spoke about the disaffected youth and the abandoned youth. And you couple that with the very racial themes that are in the X-Men story anyway, she was a very poignant, she was a character with a very big impact on, I'd like to say young minds, but there's probably a lot of old minds that would say the same thing. And through all that kind of thing, to me at least, she was a very big influence introducing the very personal level of stuff to a character's personality within my own writing. You know, it's not just about the action and the fighting and all that kind of thing, it's not just about the fact that these people have powers. It's the fact they have their own personal plights as well, to do with their family, their upbringing, how they feel like they fit in the world, who they are. And as a youth, Jubilee, her story, her plights, her trials and tribulations were a very big influence on that in my own writing at a very young age. Next, we go on to Catwoman, another obvious choice perhaps, but obvious choices are obvious choices for a reason. Probably obvious reasons. Besides the easily identifiable badassness and complete sexual allure of the character, the reason I've put Catwoman into this list is the fact that as a character she endured a 12-year-long period of hiatus, not appearing in comic books, because of some random laws set forth between a particular group. The Comics Code Authority had their own rules on how a female character can be portrayed and developed within a comic book story. And because of that, for 12 years, what was originally purely a villainess petty theft character disappeared from comic books for a long time, despite being one of Batman's original and most prominent bad guys. But even though she had that 12-year hiatus, those 12 years of not being around, she still came back, and she came back with a punch. And add to that her rise from being just a simple villainous petty theft, right up the way to being an anti-heroine and proper classy cat burglar, excuse the pun. There's a lot of weight to the Catwoman character in how just purely badass she is. And of course, she's easily Batman's most enduring love interest, which, given the Batman character as well, is a pretty significant, pretty decent medal to wear. Next, I'm going to talk about Rogue of the X-Men. Now, harkening back to something I just said about Jubilee, something that Marvel's very good at, especially with the X-Men. For me, a great character isn't just defined by what they can do or what they have done, but why they do it. There's no point rooting for a hero or a villain if you don't understand why you're rooting for them as one or the other. As for Rogue specifically, her inability to make physical contact and the purely parasitical, invasive nature of her power that you could easily say in the power of itself is inherently evil, would have you believe she's a bad guy. And yes, she did kind of go back and forth for a very long time in a lot of various versions of the story, from being good, bad. But she always came good in the end. If you look at the nature of her power, you'd look at that and you think, that's a bad guy character, that's a bad guy power. But for the Rogue character, she took that bad guy power and she found the good in it. She always came good with the X-Men. And that's because despite the fact that she couldn't make physical contact, and even if she did, she would hurt the people she did, she owned that and she turned it into a good guy trait of her personality, a challenge she had to bear that made her a better person because she could appreciate the love and life aspect more because she couldn't really experience it or endangered it in and of herself. So she had a very unique appreciation reinforced by her own powers of those things, and that just added volumes to her character. Now straying away from your traditional superhero comic books, I want to actually mention now Michonne from The Walking Dead. I had to include a true badass, someone that has no powers and no fancy gadgets either, and no superpowered friends that would come to the rescue, just her own skill and determination. Yeah, there are a lot of women in the Walking Dead comic series, and they've all survived for as long as they did for good reasons, all that kind of thing, and having friends that can help them is a good reason. But Michonne did this on her own with nothing but a katana, her ability to use that katana very, very well, and the smarts to use two defanged and declawed walkers as camouflage. I mean, it doesn't really get much more awesome than that. Going back to the Marvel world, yes, I did warn you I have a bit of a bias for. I'm going to mention a lesser known character and a much underused character in my opinion in American Dream. Now, despite the fact that this character, Shannon Carter, niece to Sharon Carter, who was a long-time on and off love interest of Captain America when she wasn't trying to kill him as Agent 13 of S.H.I.E.L.D., beside the fact that she is Marvel's own invocation of Rule 63, which is just priceless, I've always had a soft spot for this very underused character because she is essentially Captain America without the super soldier serum. And with lovely golden locks and boobs, she has all of his strengths in terms of abilities and skills and inherent, knowledge of leadership and warfare to an extent, or at least getting close to it, because obviously the super serum does give him a bit of an edge. And she has no actual mutant powers, no super serum that does that for her. It's just her. She's just human. That's just her. And she even got her hands on pretty much the same gadgets as him, plus some. So that's always a pretty heavy win. And it's a shame she doesn't get used more, because I think there's a lot of room to explore with that character that never really got explored. And now moving on to Harley Quinn. Possibly a very obvious choice. But again, obvious choices, obvious reasons. You can't not love this poor girl. Twisted by the already very twisted mind of the Joker, despite the fact that it was her job to untwist his mind, Harley Quinn became one of the most endearing bad guys I have ever had the pleasure of reading and watching in various mediums. She plays perfectly off of the Joker character, which, yes, is obvious because she was created to do so, but even so, that does not take anything away from her character as an individual, because she has had instances of having nothing to do with Joker in her own stints, or in stints with other characters such as Poison Ivy, and she's always the same mix of crazy and funny and oftentimes arousing and you just can never get bored of her. She's just bubbly and energetic and just so prominent, and you can't forget her as a character. You hear the name Joker or Batman, I automatically think Harley Quinn. That may say something about my character a bit more than I want it to, but there you go. And speaking of preferences that speak to my own personal character, now I'm going to talk about Emma Frost. Look, I know she's a colossal bitch, and she jumps in and out of other guys' beds just about as often as she jumps from one side of the good-bad argument to the other. But there's just something about her I like. Maybe it's because she's made of diamond, maybe it's because she's a blonde bombshell, or maybe it's actually the bad attitude that I kind of get drawn to. You know, I mean, it's not just girls that go after bad boys, you know, it's guys go after bad girls as well. It translates the same way. But whatever it is, I like her. I do, I really do. She has a truly intriguing character, especially recently with this whole thing going on with Cyclops and Jean. But yeah, it introduces this whole intriguing side of her character where you don't know what's going on. Is she there? Is she there? Does she not? It's just this really intriguing mix and imbalance of things going on. And there's just something to be said for a character that can hop back and forth from good to bad so often and so successfully, and still have the best interests of children at heart during the whole process. Or at least that's the way it seems. And of course you had to see this one coming. Hit Girl. The Kick-Ass books, both of them, and the Hit Girl short, mini, comic, whatever you want to call it. Fantastic. I know there's some contention about whether Kick-Ass 2 was as good as Kick-Ass 1, but I enjoyed it all the same. And Hit Girl was a big part of that. A little girl that is just so crazy. She carries a flamethrower in a Hello Kitty backpack and has super secret chemical compounds created by science that give her super strength amidst other abilities, otherwise known as cocaine, given to her by her father. I mean, please, come on, you must see where I'm coming from here. But besides that, her story, her character is all very endearing. They strike this fantastic balance between the adorable and the psychotically badass, and pull it off. It doesn't not make sense. It's not like one doesn't fit with the other. They found a way to make them both fit. And make sense is the wrong term, but I hope you know what I mean. And last but very much not least, Mary Jane Watson. Of course, no list of best female comic book characters would be complete without the quintessential love interest. The one and only MJ, easily the most recognisable, most probably, I would argue, most well-known love interest of any superhero. Even if she wasn't Spidey's first love interest, and not even his second. Because people seem to forget that Gwen Stacy wasn't his first love interest either. Before Gwen Stacy, his first girlfriend was actually Betty Brant, J. Jonah Jameson's secretary at the Daily Bugle. I find it interesting that people seem to forget that one, because I didn't, and I usually forget everything. Peter Parker's first girlfriend was Betty Brant, then it was only a very short period, but still it counts. And then there was Gwen Stacy, and then there was Mary Jane. She filled so many archetypes in just being the one character, and I want to say that she was the first one to do such a thing, especially the first one to do such a thing successfully. She was the girl next door, but she was also this heart piece that were into modelling eventually. Doting girlfriend, loving wife. They even had that long stint of their separation where it was all very confused. They still love each other, do they not? And this sounds like a soap opera, but it never got old. At least not in my opinion. The exploration of so many different facets of their relationship only just came together to add tomes to the chronicle of their relationship. I mean, there was even a point where she had superpowers of her own. I don't particularly like that, but it's something to include. As a youth, and even to this day, I have always been especially invested in the story of Peter Parker / Spider-Man and Mary Jane. As a young teenager, I would always think to myself, I want a girlfriend like that. And not just because it seemed so fairy tale, because quite often it didn't, and not just because she was so hot, and not just because it kind of gave me sort of a side entrance into imagining being a superhero like Spider-Man, but because I could attach to the story of it, the feel of it being a complete relationship, because she wasn't just a love interest character. Yes, she was created as such, and obviously she was the love interest character, but she always had a character of her own. I mean, let's face it, Peter Parker, regardless of being Spider-Man, was punching way above his weight with this girl. She was attractive, she was smart, she was funny, she had spirit and a fire in her. She was a complete character. She wasn't just this girl that goes, "Oh no, my boyfriend's gonna get hurt." I mean, yes, she'd worry, but there'd be other things going on that she would be doing while Spidey was out doing what he was doing. She'd get angry at him. She wasn't just doting like that, kind of, you know, hanging on his every word. She was an independent, strong-willed female in and of herself. And she didn't even have superpowers most of the time, or fancy gadgets, or superpowered friends. It was just her and her own willpower. I think it's safe to say, if I were actually ranking these female comic book characters in from a 10 to 1, Mary Jane would be number 1. So I can tell you that much, Mary Jane would be number 1, but the other 9, I don't know who would be above or below the others. I really don't, I'm sorry. And now, as promised, I'm going to give some honourable mentions to some other characters that I do quite like for reasons I couldn't really flesh out into full, not dumb sentences. But I still wanted to mention them because they are good characters in and of their own reasons. First being X-23, another example of Marvel pulling off their own Rule 63 invocation. But beyond that, she's just this ferocious, spunky little wildcat. Or wolf. Or badger? Psylocke, psychic ninja. Do I need say anything else? Yeah? Okay. She really likes the colour purple as well. There we go, I've got something in common with her. And Power Girl. Have to love a girl that invites you to look at her cleavage through a handy little window. And that's that, kidders. Thanks for joining me for this wild ride. And let me tell you, it was a lot of fun looking up pictures for each of these lovely ladies when you consider that Google and the internet is what it is. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like what you see and you want to see more. Throw at me some more suggestions for next week, because yes, even though it's the Christmas week, I'm still going to be doing a court next week. Check out jessicaconceptions.blogspot.co.uk for my narratives, and I will see you through the week.